On August 9th of 2025, 3 storyboards from the development of Cars 3 were discovered. One was an extended look at McQueen's crash, another of the final race. But then there's the third. This storyboard showed off an old plot for Cars 3, one where McQueen's body had been stolen by a criminal by the name of Gerald Carr, and he would have had to prove who he was while trying to get his body back before Carr would steal his life. I'm Ray of FNAR Studios, and this is everything you need to know about Cars 3. The first discovery made was the aforementioned storyboards made by John Hoffman. Now, while the storyboards have been up for quite a while and multiple YouTubers have explained what happens in them, for completion's sake, I'll give a quick rundown of what happens and what can be inferred. Lightning McQueen in Gerald Carr's body finds the house of Gerald Carr's Mima in Oildale. After some interactions, we learn that Gerald's Mima was very neglectful of Gerald and looked down on him, constantly praising McQueen, which explains why he would want to do the body swap. We also learn that Gerald had been in McQueen's body for quite some time up to that point, and had been using his money to buy her lots of things. McQueen enters the basement and finds Gerald's workshop. The cops surround the house and Cruz is revealed to have sold McQueen out. He rushes inside, finds McQueen, and the two find proof of the body swap. Before the two can gather the evidence, the cops start a fire in the basement, burning all of it. After the fire, it's shown that McQueen escaped through a tunnel. From this we can infer that Cruz had been an ally to Gerald, while not knowing he was McQueen for a substantial amount of time before this scene. Now, let's quickly go over to our other discovery before getting into the plethora of new stuff we have. Our next discovery was a triad of storyboards drawn by Sam Hood, which all seem to have been from the Boogie Woogie version of the film. For those of you who need a refresher, on the Cars 3 DVD there were a few deleted scenes. One of them was a scene in Thomasville where, before leaving, Cruz did her Boogie Woogie at the track and proclaims her admiration for McQueen as he notices that the dance draws a lightning bolt in dirt or sand. Now then, onto the boards. First is an alternate version of the More Than New Paint scene. McQueen is unveiled, just like in that storyboard, and everyone bears witness to the fabulous Lightning McQueen scheme, complete with the return of the 51. He has a little interaction with Sally and Mater, then for the first time in the movie, actually says ka-chow. After a cheeky exchange with Storm, which references the first film, he lays eyes on Cruz, seemingly being shocked that he now bears the 95. They have an argument, ending with both of them in tears as the race begins. This scene tells us a lot. In the version of More Than New Paint that was on the DVD, McQueen knew Cruz had the 95 before he got the 51. But it seems in this version he had no clue who had stolen his number. Based on the interaction, it's safe to assume that, at least for the first half of the race, things would have been dicey between McQueen and Cruz, which if you've read the Art of Cars 3 book, actually makes sense. In the Art of Cars 3 book, we see a few pages of various scenes from the script, a few of them being from this draft. The scene was named Grudge Match, and seemed to have McQueen and Cruz racing against each other before working together to take down Storm. The next scene we found was a post-race scene. McQueen approaches victory lane with a smile on his face. He pauses before properly entering, soaking in the moment. As he approaches his friends, he gets a nod of respect from Storm and gives him one back. He gets a kiss from Sally, then has a little moment with Mater, also referencing the first film. He thanks Smokey for the training, and Smokey makes a remark on how McQueen had first brought Doc back into the racing world and now had done the same for him. Then McQueen starts talking with Cruz, but gets interrupted by Guido arriving with the 95. Tex then arrives explaining that he had bought Rust-eze and is ready to put the 95 back where it belongs. McQueen hesitates, then explains that he wants Cruz to have the 95 while he keeps the 51. A reporter calls McQueen for a picture, and he brings Cruz along for it before a transition to the next scene we discovered plays. This scene tells us 3 important things about the movie at the stage. Originally, McQueen was going to give Cruz the 95 and he would have taken on the 51 instead of the other way around. Cruz was still male while the ending of the film was being planned. And lastly, this draft of the film would have been the version to feature the "Storm is over" scene from the DVD extras. Now then, on to the last scene. We get a shot of the sun over Willie's Butte before panning down to our 2 main characters. Cruz is teaching McQueen his lucky dance from earlier in the film, with McQueen messing it up quite a bit. McQueen is shown to have a new scheme, this possibly being his canonical scheme for future Piston Cup seasons. After the dance, the two engage in some banter before starting a 5-lap race. The camera follows the two before transitioning to Mac's trailer and showing off Cruz's completed collection of sacred dirt, all in named jars, along with an extra jar for the Florida 500 containing his lucky lug nuts. We transition outside of the hauler and see the 2 racers gunning it for the camera as the screen cuts to black. This scene gives us a lot of information about this draft of the movie. It seems most of the deleted scenes from the DVD were from this draft: the Boogie Woogie, Jars of Dirt, and the Bolt. This draft of the film had gotten very far in development before what seems to be a huge rewrite. I can't fathom why, because most of these honestly seem better than what we had gotten in the final film, especially with what has recently been discovered. After making these discoveries, we took a moment to gather all the information we had and went ahead with creating a sort of timeline of events. The original Cars 3 is in production. Then, the body swap is ditched for a version of the film involving imposters of McQueen and Cruz. The production gets very out of whack, and Brian Fee is brought on as director. Grudge Match Draft is in production. Few scenes are rewritten, giving us the final film. With a basic understanding of the progression of events, we went digging for information. We sent emails and Instagram messages to whoever had worked on the story or storyboards for the film, just looking for the slightest bit of info. Some people are yet to respond after months, but a few actually did. The first person to respond was Bill Presing, who had joined the Cars 3 storyboarding team pretty late in development. Because of this, there were some questions he couldn't answer, but he was able to give us some very valuable information. Hello, Bill. I'm doing a research project on the development of Cars 3. I was hoping I could maybe ask you a few questions. Please get back soon, and thank you for your time. Hi, I wouldn't mind answering some of the questions, but I may need to clear it with Pixar Legal. It may depend on the nature of the questions. Also, my time with Cars 3 was shorter than most films, so my knowledge on the subject may be lacking a bit. My questions will mostly be about your time working on the film, the scenes you boarded, and anything you know about the other plots that were considered. I see. I suspect I may not be of much help. I only worked on the film toward the end, so basically the release version. I know the early identity theft version, but I don't remember having ever seen it. Have you talked to Scott Morse? He would know a lot more than me. Alright. I do have some questions that are from later in development, if you could answer those then. I haven't talked to Scott Morse yet, as I am waiting for him to get back to me currently. In the original trailer and auto show sneak peek, along with some early reels of the opening race, Florida McQueen, the paint job with the flames, is used for the crash sequence and before. At the end of the Florida race, though, the McQueen that appears on the Jumbotron is the McQueen with the bolt on the hood that was in the opening scenes in the final. Did they swap spots at some point in development? And if so, what was the reason behind the decision? Many of the stock cars from the opening races were given the same names as the racers from the first film. This puzzles me, however, due to the cars being separate models and with some even being drastic changes. Those cars, based on their lore from other media, would be too old to still be racing during the time of the third film. Were the names chosen at random, or was there some sort of rhyme or reason to them? Questions 1 and 2. I have no clue at all. What are your top 5 favorite scenes that you storyboarded, whether cut or left in, and why? I'm not even sure if I boarded as many as 5 scenes. As I said, I wasn't on the film very long. I remember doing a scene in the truck trailer where McQueen was arguing with the rookie car, and I did a big chunk of the race at the end of the film. I'll need to dig up my old boards to remind myself and get back to you on that. You say you know of the identity theft version. Is there any information you can maybe share about it, small or large? I'm quite sure I can't legally talk about the plot or characters, but my memory is fuzzy and untrustworthy on it anyway. I'm pretty sure that version of the film was being directed by Rob Gibbs, but sadly he has passed away. When did you start working on Cars 3, and how did you get put onto the film? I need to check the dates and get back to you on that too. Personally, I don't like working on the Cars films and try to avoid them, but I assumed I needed to meet quota and I got cast on it. I was bouncing around between shows a lot then, and probably agreed because it was short term. Why, out of the 3 sequels coming out in that time period, Cars 3, Incredibles 2, Toy Story 4, was Cars 3 pushed back to 2017 instead of keeping its original 2018 release plan? Why not push the other movies? I don't remember its release date changing. I probably wasn't aware. I know Incredibles 2 took Toy Story 4's spot because Toy Story 4 needed more time, and Incredibles 2 was in a better place. But I don't remember anything about Cars 3's release date. Quick follow-up question. How come you didn't like working on the Cars films? For me, I don't enjoy drawing the characters very much because graphically they're basically giant talking heads with a horizontal silhouette. Makes it hard to compose interesting shots, limiting variety. They also have no limbs, so posing options are also lacking, and they have no necks so you can't turn their heads. Only so many ways to motivate the camera with eye darts. All the things that make visual storytelling interesting to draw run out quickly, and drawing it starts feeling like a chore. If you really like drawing cars, it wouldn't get old fast. I just prefer drawing humanoids. Ah, that makes sense. Thank you for your time and for answering these. Thanks to Presing, we now know two big things for certain. First, Rob Gibbs was in fact the director of the original Cars 3. If you go through the information that we had beforehand, it was relatively obvious, but it's good to finally have that confirmation. Secondly, as said in the previous section, that Boogie Woogie draft of the movie had gotten very far in development, so far that when they rewrote it, they were hiring new people to replace shots of the final race. The next and the final person to respond was Scott Morch, the story supervisor for the film. He hadn't worked on the Rob Gibbs version of the film, but had given us a bit of information on it as well as the final film. Hello, Scott. I've been working on a research project covering the development of Cars 3. Bill Presing referred me to you when I had asked about the multiple versions of the film from earlier in its life. I was hoping you could maybe answer a few questions if you have the time. Thank you for reading, have a nice day, and please get back to me soon. Hey there. I can try to help out, sure. Via email? Yeah, that'll work. I can try to be as helpful as I can here without crossing any confidentiality issues, considering I'm not entirely clear on what this is for. Additionally, you're searching for some fairly specific things that I've honestly forgotten all about. Cars 3 was in production a long time ago, and I wasn't part of the initial version that Rob was directing. At that time, I was directing Cars short films, but here goes. How many drafts of Cars 3 were made? I currently know 4, but it'd be nice to know if there were more. There were 2 versions, the Rob Gibbs version and the Brian Fee version, of which I was a part. Rob's had 3 screenings, I think, and Brian's had 6 or 7, which is typical during production as we write and adjust changes. What was your favorite part about working on the project? Building and encouraging the team I was lucky to work with, honestly. Nothing is better than having fun with your friends and pushing each other to make the best film possible. I enjoyed the research aspects as well, and enjoyed the Smokey character in particular, as I put a lot of character aspects of my dad into him. Was the Doppelganger story a draft that began after Brian Fee took over as director, or was it a change in direction proposed by John Lasseter or the late Rob Gibbs? Again, I wasn't part of Rob's team, and can't speak to those specifics, but the 2 versions you're referring to were under Rob's supervision. Ultimately, we wanted to pull away from a story that felt more like a general adventure and had more emotion, getting back to a closer shade of the first film. Was Chick Hicks and the HTV sponsor going to be involved with Jackson Storm? An old storyboard showed him with a headset on and had Jackson surrounded by Chick's pitties from the first film. I think we might have explored using Chick in that way, but ultimately found him funnier if he had his own show, and wanted Storm to be an entirely new threat from out of nowhere, to reflect how fresh talent can take a seasoned vet by surprise. If Storm had been from Chick's team, it would have felt a bit more predictable. Was Jackson Storm going to be with Mood Springs? The Art of Cars 3 book shows some storyboards with him having the 33. Again, we changed sponsorship ideas as we developed the story, usually to address a better story angle. Early storyboards often just plugged in anything that sounded good at the moment as a placeholder until we settled on the best idea that fit the character in question. Were there any other NASCAR drivers they were going to use for the Legends before going with the ones they selected? The Legends were always intended to be evocative of an array of historic personalities, hoping to draw focus to elements of racing that contributed to the evolution of the sport, not just specific drivers. Our research trips yielded some specific stories of specific drivers that we found an affinity for and wanted to honor, so we worked with some of their personality traits and exploits to honor them. Danny was originally named Carlos before Daniel Suarez was picked to voice him. Did any other cameo cars have original names? What were they? Honestly, we swapped out placeholder character names when we met and got to know actual drivers, and wanted to find a space to honor them in the Cars world. I don't recall any other specifics, but we did swap out a few. Thank you for your time. This tells us 2 important things. There was always speculation on why the Chick Hicks with headset diecast was a thing. Some believed he could have been a commentator or a crew chief, or that it was just a design change for his TV show. Morse's email confirms that Chick was tried as Jackson Storm's crew chief before the team decided to make Chick's Picks with Chick Hicks. Additionally, Morse mentioned there being 3 screenings of the film under Rob Gibbs, which, to us, further confirms the notion of the police chase storyboards being their own draft of the movie. Speaking of which, when looking for the information about Cars 3's old versions before our discoveries, Cool Cars YT's discovery of the police chase scene was a very big piece of the puzzle. There were 3 clips uploaded, all in pretty bad quality. Luckily, we were able to find the source of 2 of the 3 clips, which were uploaded after discovery mixed with Cool Cars' video. After finding said sources, we tried to contact the storyboard artists, but couldn't find any contact information, and those we did contact simply hadn't responded. In the meantime, I had tried my best to figure out what the order of the clips was, and that's what ended up being uploaded. Then, while searching for contact information, we made a shocking discovery. Each of the storyboard artists who had worked on these storyboards hadn't been Pixar employees. nor had they worked on Cars 3. These storyboards were made by interns in 2017 and 2018. This had confused us as it was all but confirmed that the police chase had been from its own draft of the movie. Then, after a quick trip to the Wayback Machine, the pieces started to click together. 7 or more Pixar interns were given an excerpt of the 2014 version of Cars 3 to board out. This is why the boards were made after the release of Cars 3, and why so many of them seem to follow the same progression of events. This also lines up with what we had seen of the 2014 draft of the film. We know that before the discovered scene, McQueen, as Gerald, and Cruz would have teamed up for whatever reason, before Cruz gave him up in the discovered scene. The cop chase would have been during the team-up. This would explain why McQueen drives poorly in the car chase. The script was written with McQueen being in Gerald's body in mind. After this, a pretty big email came in which gave us a lot of information. We had an email sent out to Jay Schuster while going over the police chase storyboards, and a bit before finding out that they were from interns, we'd gotten a response back. What model would Gerald's car from Rob Gibbs' version have been? And if so, was he modeled and reused for Cars 3 as background characters? Same goes with Cruz from the 2013-14 draft. Gerald's car was the most run-of-the-mill pedestrian model. I remember using a basic Chrysler K-car body style, or K-car-esque, from Cars 1 to start. I think he made it only to drawovers in the process. And then Rob was replaced by Brian Fee and that whole storyline was scrapped, thank God. So, never made it to modeling. Also, all the characters from Cars 1 needed to be rebuilt into the new pipeline of that time, so he would have been an upgrade to something a little bit more current with updated shapes and details. I plastered a wall with Cruise reference that included things like Toyota Celicas, 80s English market Ford Escorts, obscure stuff like 70s Opals. He, at the time, was intended to be an underdog, written as a basically rodeo or circus clown turned racer. We did pursue the aforementioned Ford Escort in shape language, very uninspiring lines. His paint included circled dots of contrasting color. I recall white on a blue body, literally drawn in the boards with clown lips and all that. Eye roll. The beginning stages of Cars 3 were really hard. For Bill Cohn and I, it was a year-long car design experiment. Personally, I kept my head down and waited for John Lasseter to come in and change it all. How did celebrity culture and the party play into the original identity theft story? Is there anything about the plot you can share? McQueen's time in LA was basically a surface exploration of LA car culture, exploring tropey themes of Hollywood nightlife, as you mentioned, celebrity culture. At that point, McQueen's identity had yet to be stolen, so his was a re-experiencing of his own celebrity tendencies through that filter, yet with fish out of water themes too. I don't know what Rob's intentions truly were for those sequences. I suppose he could have been playing on celebrity as an identity-changing motif, an essence of identity theft, perhaps? Rob Gibbs was great at directing Cars shorts. His were 5 minutes of hilarious, if somewhat slapstick action, truly entertaining. His attempt at a full-length feature was tilted by trying to fit 16 shorts into an 80-minute movie, strung together with a thin plot and antics. With that said, I think that party scenario was just base exposition. A vehicle to show off a variety of celebrity cars, the Batmobile, A-Team van, etc. What would the climax of the identity theft story be? The wedding? Or was there something else? I'm afraid to say that the climax was simply Sally coming to her senses. Yes, at her and Gerald's wedding, and I seem to remember Mater sniffing out Gerald's fraud. Was there some backstory or motivation to Gerald marrying Sally? To ultimately gain control of Radiator Springs? I don't 100% recall, but it was definitely not worth the trouble. Was the McQueen and Cruz mentorship idea still within the plot in this draft, or was Cruz going to be a one-off character like Finn and Holly? Yes, the mentorship was still a theme. Gerald dumps McQueen in a cornfield or equivalent in the California Central Valley, where, upon waking up, runs into Cruz and his circus colleagues. I think McQueen coaches Cruz through a series of jumps and spectacles for his circus act, building Cruz's confidence. I believe Cruz expressed his goal to race, but also the barriers that limit him. I designed a version of Cruz that was bigger body, muscle car-esque. I remember now, I was referencing a 2000s Dodge Stratus RT, and inflating its length a bit, changing up body panels, multicolored, cheap pick and pull aesthetic, and tacking on side pipes and stuff Cruz thought made him look like a racer. It was all over the map. He aspired to race, and McQueen, through antics, a car chase, etc., teaches Cruz how to. At that point, who knows if Cruz was a one-off? I'd say the whole movie was a one-off, actually lacking identity. The whole thing was primarily a way to expand the Cars universe through exposition of LA car culture and a strange Scooby-Doo-esque whodunit story. The doppelganger story seems to have some parallels with the identity theft story. Was the story any different aside from there not being a literal body swap? Honestly, I don't recall any difference between the two storylines. I think in that early stage, 2013 to 14, things were in such a flux. The two may have blended and nobody really took notice. It was so long ago, sorry, I can't piece that together. All I remember is the body swap taking up all my time trying to figure out how we would rebody McQueen and body over Gerald and maintain any kind of accurate outward appearances that were completely skewed or obvious. I vaguely recall a sculpt that Jerome Ramft made of a rebodied McQueen, but that is a very distant memory. I'm sure he still has it in his office, or may have recycled it. Sadly, the film was very forgettable, but perhaps that's what it took to get it in the right direction. Back to racing, back to legacy and the legends, mentoring of crews that make sense, and how an elder racer gracefully bows out the competition. This is our biggest info dump yet. By looking at images of Chrysler K cars and comparing them to the models from the first film, we were able to deduce that Gerald's car was a similar build to Chuck Manifold. Schuster also shared Cruz's original car body inspirations, along with which build they ended up going with, that being the Ford Escort. Cruz was also going to be a clown car? The description of the paint scheme doesn't match what was in the storyboard at all, so it's possible the blue with white polka dot look was decided on after Hoffman's boards were finished, or it was dropped before you'd begun working on them. We also got a solid idea of how the celebrity culture mentioned in the Art of Cars 3 book would have played into the movie. In regards to the climax, Mater would have been the one to figure out that Gerald wasn't truly McQueen, which does make sense. After all, it is Mater. The mentorship question gave us our biggest group of info yet. McQueen would have woken up in a cornfield before meeting Cruz and helping him out at the circus. Afterwards, McQueen would have learned of Cruz's dream to be a racer. At some point, the highway chase happens. McQueen and Cruz split up, and then the storyboard we discovered happens. We also got word of another design for Cruz, this time being a sort of scrambled Rubik's Cube of car parts. Lastly, there's a question that shouldn't have been asked due to future debunking, however, there is one part that piqued my interest. Supposedly Jerome Ramft had made a sculpture of an altered body McQueen for the film, though it is unknown if it was recycled or if he has it. Our attempts to find out had come up short. From here on, the discoveries are pretty small. Some more police chase storyboards were found over time, but the high-quality versions of the originals that Cool Cars YT had found were still missing, as the artist had seemingly removed them from the internet. Luckily, fellow YouTuber Gerbil came through, as he had archived them a very long time ago in perfect quality. Not too long ago, an interesting comment appeared on one of my videos. Hi. I found very interesting details on the Cars 3 2014 original version that could reveal more of the plot. I was able to extract hidden gems from the deleted scene. So whether you want to get some official new info from animators or you just want to make a video of you just theorizing about this version, it's fine. It's hard to get all animators to speak about it. If you still plan on making it, let me know. The video is half written right now. If you'd like, you can shoot what you found my way on the D app. I believe I have you on my DM list. I posted it. Please, if you want to include it in your project, all I ask is give me credits, that's all. A few days later, they had posted a video which I got a ping for in the description.
You know him as the Chin, Whitening McQueen, the most popular race car to come along in decades. Yesterday, you announced your retirement. Why?
Going out on top. Something that meant a lot to me. It was spend the rest of my life right here with you. What do you say? Will you marry me?
Yes.
We could do it.
What? Tonight?
Why not? You're home. No one's here.
Sarah. Yeah.
Sally.
Hi. I think you were a little upset when we met. There's not a single here married.
Oh, I can get her.
The description of the video reads as follows. At 5 Nights at Ray's. Studying the Cars 3 2014 original plot deleted scene, I figured you could barely hear Gerald as McQueen and Sally still talking on the TV, but sadly it's not very audible or clear enough to understand what they say. So I used AI to extract and clear those voices coming from the TV and split it from Mima's talk over it. Then I wrote what I could understand, and I had to use the help of another AI to be sure and get to understand the whole thing. Sadly, there are some parts that are impossible to understand, but if any of you get to understand what they say in those missing parts, please feel free to write in a comment below. This is very important because here we find out Gerald is pushing Sally to marry him tonight in Radiator Springs, meaning that McQueen would never make it in time to stop the wedding, and he'd lose Sally. Pixar was darker than ever with this. If it wasn't obvious enough that the found storyboard took place at the end of Act 2 or early Act 3, well, now it's too obvious. Again, not everything from the clip is perfectly clear, so if you or a friend manages to figure out what else is being said in this scene, please be sure to leave a comment. Now then, here we have the final and most recent discovery, also from a comment. I can help if you want. I found a lot of information and pictures. A few days later, I received a stray friend request. Hi, I'm Intern Alex. Do you remember me? I'm the guy who have a bit of Cars 3 pictures. Oh, from the one community post. What's up, dude? Yeah. So, you doing okay? Look. Yes, thanks for asking. What about you? Ooh, where did you find that first one? Pretty alright, just woke up. Twitter. That sounds good. Really? What account? Sorry, my English isn't good at all. It's alright, dude, I get that. Jonathan E. Stewart's account. He was a screenwriter for Cars 3. I was playing with Google Lens for search images and I found that tweet. I would have liked to know more, but that was all there was. I spoke with him and he told me that the film at that stage went through 3 test screenings. Oh yeah, that I knew about from when I interviewed Scott Morse. After that, I didn't want to get any more information out of him because he mentioned that he could get into trouble with Disney. Inter Alex had archived what seemed to be a sketch by a Pixar employee who was working on the 2014 Cars 3. This gave us a bit of information. Based on McQueen yelling, "We've got to get to LA," one could infer that the wedding was actually going to be held in LA and not Radiator Springs. Or this was an idea that had gotten dropped. We also see the name of Bob's associate, that being Vic Fixes.
Editor right here, I forgot to mention this. This is a storyboard. County's doing towny things, probably from the opening of Cars 3 2014. Could also just be from Boogie Woogie draft. It's very inconsequential, but realistically it's probably from 2014 considering the sketch we saw earlier. On to the theory section.
Now that we've got all this information, we can make a few theories to fill in the gaps of the movie's plot. In the scene where McQueen is discovered, Cruz mentions wanting to make it to a race. This could mean one of two things. Cruz wanted to spectate a race, or he wanted to participate in one. If we look at that second possibility, it has 2 branching paths of its own. Cruz would have trained with McQueen to be able to qualify for the race sometime after the highway chase, or Cruz would have trained with McQueen for the race he had already qualified for. I personally think the idea of McQueen training Cruz for the qualifying makes the most sense if we're trying to fill up space in the movie. My only other theory isn't really a theory per se, just an assumption based on how movies are made and what Jay Schuster had told us about the ending. If Gerald having stolen McQueen's body was discovered by Mater, it's safe to assume that over the course of McQueen's journey back to his body, we would have had a few scenes of Gerald enjoying the life of Lightning McQueen and Mater being suspicious of him. So, recap time. There are 3 versions of Cars 3. Cars 3 2014, Cars 3's Boogie Woogie script, and the final Cars 3. Cars 3 2014. Lightning McQueen is living life in the fast lane at the peak of his career, until a trip to LA that could ruin his life forever. After a party with many famous cars, he gets carnapped by the notorious criminal Gerald Carr, who due to his envy of the red race car, steals his body and ditches him in a cornfield. After waking up in Gerald's body, McQueen meets Cruz and his circus squad and helps them with their act, during which Cruz tells McQueen about his dream to become a racer. Later in the film, Cruz and McQueen are chased on the highway by the police. They eventually get split up, and McQueen finds the house of Gerald's Mimo. After learning about Gerald's horrible living situation and discovering the truth of what happened, the police arrive. Cruz arrives and also discovers the truth. Before the two can grab the evidence, the basement is lit on fire by the police and McQueen sneaks out. Finally, at the wedding, Mater reveals that Gerald isn't really McQueen, which one way or another would lead to McQueen getting his body back upon his arrival. Cars 3 Boogie Woogie. After the usual Cars 3 opening, McQueen is to be trained by the RRC's best trainer, Cruz Ramirez. After practicing at Fireball Beach, constantly being crushed by Cruz and learning of his Boogie Woogie dance, The two go to Thunder Hollow. In Mac's trailer, after the demo derby, McQueen has his legendary crash out, which leads to Cruz leaving with all his things. Everything falls off the truck, and he tells McQueen about his abuelo. The two reconcile and they head to Thomasville, where the final movie's training would take place.
Hey, Editor Ray again. Forgot to mention the bolts. That happens before they leave for Florida. Yeah.
McQueen arrives in Florida, feeling good about his chances, only for Sterling to take away his number. McQueen would then be offered the Dynaco 51 by Tex and would arrive on the track. After seeing Cruz, the two would race against each other, harboring some sort of resentment. After the crash, the two would reconcile once more and work together to take down Storm. During the final lap, McQueen passes Storm, winning the race. The two now have a mutual respect for one another. McQueen is offered his 95, and he gives it to Cruz. The two then go on to be racing teammates in the future. Cars 3's development is a wild ride. There's so much that was changed. Some good, and some bad. Some people are happy with the final movie, and others simply aren't. How do you feel about the Cars 3 we got? Do you think one of these older versions would have been better? Let me know down below. I'd like to thank my friends Cars Dude 64, Jados Entertainment, SC Racer 97, Claculus, Jacob 48 Johnson, The Cars Shifter, and Smokey's Garage for helping out with all of the research for this video. And a very, very special thanks to my channel members for allowing me to afford CapCut Premium and to be able to edit this video efficiently.
Hey guys, it's me, Editor Ray, making my final cameo for the video. Woo! I would just like to state, we got a new channel member, and this one's a Piss and Cup official, which means you're going to be hearing their name at the end of all these videos now. So, special thank you to Mackenzie Ebby for being an official and donating about $4.50 Canadian a month.
I've got a lot more Cars, Sonic, and Thomas videos in the works, so be sure to stay tuned for those. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.